Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Samar Hasan and I'm the founder of Epiphany. Assalamu alaikum. जैसे कि आप लोग सब जानते हैं मैं Epiphany की फाउंडर हूँ और मेरा नाम समर हसन है और आज हम वापस आ गए हैं अपनी 21वीं एपिसोड के साथ ऑन Epiphany Talks. जैसे कि आप लोगों को मालूम है लेकिन एक बार फिर से दोहरा देती हूँ. Epiphany Talks हमने स्टार्ट किया था कोविड की बिल्कुल शुरुआत में जब पाकिस्तान में कोविड पहली दफ़ा हिट किया और स्टार्ट हुआ क्योंकि हमें लगा कि बहुत सारे बिजनेसमैन हैं, बिजनेस वुमेन हैं, young people who want to understand how to navigate. उनको समझ नहीं आ रहा था कि कैसे अपने बिजनेस को आगे लेके चलना है, कैसे इस क्राइसिस को हमने ओवरकम करना है. So we started this series called Epiphany Talks. ये जो होगी once again it'll be primarily in English में होगी because हमारी guest international है. But just as an intro, so Celia Hodent is with us today, जो कि game UX consultant है. User experience design करती हैं, USA में होती हैं. She's worked on Fortnite. Also, she used to be the director of UX at Epic Games. And obviously now she works in a bunch of very, very interesting areas. Okay, so I'm going to quickly invite Celia so she can tell us a little bit more about herself.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, Celia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Thanks so much. Thank you for joining in.
Of course. My pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So I just very quickly introduced you partially in Urdu, partly in English about how you're a game UX consultant. And how you've got this amazing, rich experience of applying user experience and cognitive science in product development and more specifically video games. So tell us a little bit more about what you do and what you've done in the past, both.
Sure. So my background is in academia. I come from psychology. I have a PhD in psychology that I got in France. I'm French originally. And very quickly, I worked in the game industry because I've always played games when I was little. And I really love the game industry and just like see how games are made and participate into that. So what I do is I apply my knowledge from cognitive science. So it's the science of mental processes. So what's happening in the mind as we try to make sense of the world around us. It's not about what's going on biologically. It's not about the neurons. It's about the mind processes like attention or memory and that sort of things. And so playing a video game and experiencing a video game happens in people's minds. And so that's the reason why understanding a little bit how the mind works is good to offer a better experience. So this is what I've been doing. It was quite a new job back in the day, especially in video games. It's not new in other industries. It's more what we call that human factor psychology or ergonomics. And it's all about making sure that the objects around the world and the systems that we're using are fit for human characteristics. So as humans, we have great performances, but we also have great flaws. And so we adjust the objects so it can be used by humans. So for example, for industrial design, in ergonomics, we're gonna have a mug it's the morning for me, so getting a cup of tea. Having a handle is just it's easier for humans to just grab the mug without burning yourself if you touch the mug directly. And so that's something that's made to have a better use for humans. This is what we call usability. But it's the same thing with digital world. So how we can make sure that a system like a video game or an application is going to be easy to use for humans. And so in case of games, it's not only that, because a video game is not a tool. We don't use a game in order to do something else. As like today, like we're connected on an interface and we're using an app so that we can chat. This is a tool. This is not the whole point. Using the app is not the whole point. Using the game is the whole point. So not only a game needs to be usable, but it also needs to be engaging because we need to be entertained and have fun. And it's also art, so it needs to move us emotionally. So we look also into how we can make sure that the game is going to be both usable and engaging. So this is what I do. I apply my knowledge in cognitive science into helping game developers improving the game so that they can offer the best experience to the players and the experience that they wanted to offer them.
So look, it's very, very interesting because normally when people are doing a PhD in psychology, you would imagine that they want to become psychologists or pursue a different career path or maybe teach psychology or something of that sort, right? And in your case, it's very practical. In a way, it's a very practical sort of application that you're using your degree for. But how, and you mentioned, of course, that you were a gamer, but did you know when you were getting your degree that this is the direction that you would like to take one day? Or okay, all
No,
right.
not
So
at
go
all.
ahead, tell us.
Not at
Okay.
all. So when you do a PhD, it's typically to do research after that. So
Hmm.
people who do have a PhD in psychology, they end up doing a postdoc in a different university, and they end up being, like you said, a professor. And so they both teach and do research academically. But yeah, this is. No, I didn't know at all that I wanted to do that. And I didn't know that I wanted to do a PhD to begin with. I wanted to be a speech doctor. But I was told that it was good to have some notions in psychology. And so I started psychology, and I had no idea that the psychology discipline was so broad and so interesting. And I didn't know the scientific part of psychology when there's research and psychophysics and experimental psychology, cognitive psychology, all that I didn't know at all. And so when I discovered it, I actually loved it. And so I stayed much longer until doing a PhD. But I the research part there, it was not really something for me. It's in France it's quite dusty, and it's there's a lot of politics in there. And so I love creativity, I love arts, I love music, and video games. I didn't start in video games. I actually started working for educational games. So I started working at VTech. VTech is making it's a Chinese company, but it's worldwide. And so I was in the French part, and I was helping making educational games adjusted to the French curriculum, because from my background, I studied how the cognitive development of children and adults, and so I wanted to help make games really educational for kids. And that was not super fun for me, because at the end of the day, I figured, I realized that educational games sell to parents, even though there's not a lot of research on, is it really educational? Do kids really learn about the letters and the numbers when they play these toys? Playing is educational by itself. We learn a lot by playing, but do they teach really what they say they teach regarding math or letters? And at that time I saw a lot of excitement around video games, and there were also a lot of parents that were worried about video games. So I looked at the research on games, and it's just started like that. It's just my life has always been like that. Is I had plans, and the plans never, life happens, like we say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea, it's something that's going to happen, I think, more and more, because the jobs of tomorrow don't exist today. And so the idea is to always be very open-minded to what did you learn, and how can you apply this knowledge and these skills to new areas. And so this is how I ended up in video games.
And I'm really happy that you've actually touched upon this, right? Because it's only in hindsight when you can connect the dots and you're like, aha, this is why I studied this. Oh, now I can apply it this way. But I think it requires that agility of mind and being able to always look out and say, okay, fine, now I need to do this. But also on the other hand, did you have to acquire new skills?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Well, in academia, it's we do. So I was doing research, and so the research is very detailed and very well conducted. But in academia, it's taking a long time, because this is all too advanced science. When you start working in private enterprise, so in video games, the research is not going to be as rigorous, because the idea is not to advance science. The idea is just to make a better game or a better product. So the research is going to be more lighter, but we need to be faster, because the game developers, they need answers. And so I needed to adjust to ensure, first of all, to adjust my vocabulary, making sure that I spoke the same language, because a lot of, sometimes you come from academia and you know all these terms that, like if you play Scrabble, it's just making a huge score at Scrabble, but it's not really helping to communicate with other people. So it's all the effort into being able to transmit my knowledge, and so we can all speak the same language and make sure to adapt to the pacing of the video game industry. That's pretty fast-paced industry. All these things I had to learn, of course.
Okay, so tell us more about what it takes to design UX strategy and processes in video games and how to do it well.
Yeah, so I'm not a designer myself, so the idea is I make sure that we're aligned with what experience we want to offer for who. Like who are going to be the users, who is our core target. Like, for example, picking a game, like let's take the example of Fortnite. In Fortnite, we have building and we have shooting. Okay, so the people who might be interested in Fortnite are people who are used to shooter games. So Gears of War, for example, or there's some RPG elements, so Borderlands, or there's building, so Minecraft. And so we try to figure out, who's going to be the players are going to be interested in that sort of game. What have they been playing before? So we can have a better idea of their expectations in terms of how a system works when you have those sorts of mechanics and systems in the game. And so we define this, and we define exactly what is the core experience that we want to offer players. What is Fortnite about? So it's about building, it's about crafting, it's about exploring, it's about combat, but there's some elements of tower defense in Fortnite. I worked mostly on Save the World. Like the origin of Fortnite was Save the World, and Battle Royale came very up late. So I left Epic in October 2017, and Battle Royale came out in September, and it was crafted at the last minute. So I mostly worked on the Save the World part. And so you had more of that aspect of tactics and tower defense and preparing your combat. So this is the core of Fortnite, and also the part that it's collaborative. It's a game where you play with your friends. And so all these things are the core elements of what we want to offer. So my job as a UX strategist, the director of UX, is ensuring that we all stay true to these pillars of the game, and we keep in mind who is our core target. And so it's about staying on tracks, and then ensuring that we have the proper pipeline to make it work. So Fortnite has a lot of systems that is going to be very UI heavy. Crafting system needs a lot of interaction design. And so we're going to need to hire UX designers, for example, so that we can do a proper job of ensuring that players, if they want to craft a gun or they want to craft a trap, and we need to ensure that the whole process of crafting is not going to be complicated, because the game is going to be challenging, but not challenging to figure out how it works, and not challenging to figure out how to craft. So this is the whole point, making sure we have the right people, then we have the right process. Iterative designs, called design thinking, is the best way to ensure that you're going to progress faster towards your goals. So we have assumptions. Designers design something, we test it right away before implementing it, and we do a few rounds. When it looks good, or at least when we solve the big problems, we implement it, and then we retest, and then we art it up, and we retest, etc. So it's that loop where it starts small, and then as the game progresses, it's getting a bigger, becoming a bigger loop. And so the whole process of testing at the right moments, and ensuring that the results of our testing, there's going to be action points, and then we can retest. All of that has to be put in place. So this is what I do, making sure that we are all aligned in what experience we're offering to whom, and then making sure that we have a proper pipeline, framework and processes, so that we can be guided along the way and we're not diverted from our goals.
Look, so a lot of stuff that you're saying is actually very interesting, because it applies to entrepreneurship in general. So design thinking, iterating, working again and again, and going back very swiftly to your users and making sure that the users get it. and they like it, or if they don't like it, absorbing and then making sure, okay, this was the feedback loop and this is what needs to change, absorbing all of that and then transmitting it into actionable items. All of that is it's not new for the entrepreneurs either.
Mhm.
But tell me, in the game, when you're talking about the gaming industry, usually, so some of the users, there may be the maximum number of users who are similar in their personas and their behaviors and the way they want to interact with the games, but then there are going to be different types of users as well. So when you're running the different tests, are there different pockets of audiences? What is a good size of the audience? What happens? Are they interacting? How do they interact? How are they playing version 1.0, for instance? How does
Yeah.
that get?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's it's a complicated question because it really depends on what type of game we're talking about. So you have in a game, when you work on a game, you have to define what are the different systems and mechanics. So there's one, and then so you have players who love that type of games, that these are going to be the first adopters of the game.
Yes.
And then you have players, let's say players who like shooters, but they might come to Fortnite because of they like shooting, but then they have to discover the building mechanic, or vice versa. You have players and they might be coming from Minecraft. They love building, but they're not super into the combat part. But now they're going to have to learn about shooting. So it's first about what do players know, and depending on where they're coming from, what are the things that they're less familiar with. And we knew that, for example, the building part of it was going to be less familiar to most players, even players coming from a building game, because the way the building system works in Fortnite is quite different from another game like Minecraft. And so we know that it's a new mechanic, it's a new system, so we're going to have to put a lot of effort in that. So we define our audience from that, where they're coming from, and then what is their level of engagement towards a game. You have like more casual gamers. So casual gamers are just people who like to try a game and they play every now and then, but they like it and they can be engaged, but they're not going to play that much of the time. And then you have what we call hardcore gamers, what I prefer to call more expert gamers, who are people who are going to play a lot of these types of games. And you can have like players that are casual in one genre, and they're more hardcore expert in another genre. So this is what we're trying to define. And depending on the type of game, is it supposed to be a niche game or is it supposed to be a broad game? This is how we try to figure out who we're going to invite. But we do try to invite, when we do playtest sessions, the core group, of course, but also people in the periphery, so that we can ensure that the system is not just usable by people that's super hardcore and they know these sort of systems very well. And it's also very important to make it accessible. So that's the reason why being inclusive in who we're inviting to do the tests, it's very important. So we're not designing in a silo, and we're not just designing with
and you're getting the fresh perspective from different types of audiences as well, just to improve the overall experience of the game.
Yes and no. So in UX, it's more about functionality than what people like. So it's more objective measures. Like, do people understand how to do this? Are people understanding what are their objectives, and do they understand how to get there? It's more about that rather than do they like it or not? Because it's anytime you ask people about their opinions, you need a lot of people to ensure that it's not biased, because opinions are very subjective. Yes. So we need a large audience, a large sample size to be able to get to that. So it's typically more down the road when a game is in alpha or a game is in beta stage, when you start to invite a lot of people, like thousands of people, to play your game. This is when you can send a survey to ask them what they like, didn't like, so we can try to figure out what's going on. But in the beginning, it's more about functionality and do people understand it, and are the objectives clear and how to get there.
Understood. Okay, tell me another thing. So, does this vary across the different platforms that people are engaging with to play the games? For instance, mobile, console, are they going to be different? Okay, all right, you're
Yeah,
nodding.
so
Okay.
yes and no. The process is going to be the same, but the
Hmm,
constraints are different. So
hmm,
on mobile, of course, the real estate is much smaller. So you can't have a huge HUD that we have in games on PC or console when you have, it's much larger. And so it's easier to discriminate and to click on the different elements
hmm,
or to select with your controller. On mobile, it's smaller, and if the icons would have to tap on are too close to one another, people can tap on the wrong one. So it's the same principles, but the constraints are going to be different. So we're going to have to make sure that we solve for the specificities of the platform. And so
okay.
it's complicated when you try to do, so on Fortnite, typically you have one
Hmm,
interface that is across all the different platforms. This is
hmm,
very hard to do, and it's not the best experience possible, because ideally you want to adjust the system, the interaction design, and the UI to the specificities of the platform.
hmm, hmm,
That would bring a better experience for the user of that platform. But the problems of that is if you have a game that is seamlessly being experienced across multiple platforms. Let's say you start in the morning, you play Fortnite on your console, and then you go to work, and on the bus you play on your phone. If the interface and the interaction design is changing in between those two, then it's not consistent, and you have to relearn, and it's not going to be good either.
hmm.
So
Yeah,
if
that's
you have
quite the
a
right
game,
challenge.
yeah. So if you have a game that you publish across different platforms, think about is this going to be a game that are people expected to start on the platform and then move on to the other platform, or are people going to be siloed within different platforms? If they're siloed, they're only going to play on mobile, or they're only going to play on console, or they're only going to play on PC, then it's better to adjust the interaction design and the UI to the platform, to the constraints of the platform.
Hmm,
If you expect your players to hop from one platform to another, we try to make it consistent across all platforms.
hmm.
So these are the questions you have to ask yourself, how players are going to use your game.
Hmm. I've got another question now. So obviously we see that there is a growing trend of mobile games. So now when people are designing new games, is it advisable to just simply design for the for mobile users, mobile game players?
So if you have a bigger market on mobile, and you know that this is where your game is going to be able to succeed, you should start with the mobile constraints. You have to start with a platform that makes sense to you. It's quite a challenge to port a game coming from PC or console to mobile. There are a few, if you're interested into that, there are a few talks from the GDC UX Summit. There was a talk, I think, last year about how to, the constraints of taking a big RPG like Skyrim, from console, PC, from console to mobile, and what are the different challenges. So you can watch this talk, but it is quite challenging. So think about where are your players, what platform is going to be the first platform where you're going to develop on, and so you can really concentrate on that. But you have to think about also how you're going to expand, because if you always from the beginning think it's going to be across multiple platforms, but then when you start designing the game, and you only solve for one platform, you're going to end up as later down the lane, when you have to start working on the other platforms, then you might have to redesign the whole thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's the thing. You have to define what is the first platform of choice and how you're going to expand later on, and try to be smart about that. And again, it depends very much on what type of game we're talking about, what sort of systems there are in the game. Is it heavy UI or not? So it's hard for me to give you, there's no one-fit-all solution. But this is what we do in UX strategy. We think about the problems that we have now, but also the problems ahead of time. So we're not going to have to redo everything in 2 years. So this is exactly what a UX strategy is all about. It's just like thinking ahead of time and try to put the priorities where they're going to be the most efficient.
Okay, so next question. I want to talk a little bit about the Game UX Summit. So why did you start it? What was the objective behind it? And over time, has it grown and evolved in a new direction, or do you think it's more or less still in the same kind of areas that you wanted it to go into?
Yeah, so it's really made to be small, and I think it's gonna stay small for now. It started more when I was at Epic, and I wanted to show to Epic people, because when I arrived at Epic, UX was not a thing. So I started, the UX initiative. I started to talk about what it is, and to create a team and put together a lab and all that. But I had the feeling that they only a lot of people from the studio only knew UX through me. And I wanted to show them, like, hey, that it is a big thing. It's not just me. And look at all these people working on UX stuff. So this is the reason why I wanted to have a sort of reunion, and people were excited about it. So we said, okay, let's do a conference, a one-day conference, and we're just going to invite people. And we were super lucky that so Epic Games is in North Carolina. So I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina at that moment. And Duke University is really not far from there. And this is where Dan Ariely is teaching. And I asked him if he wanted to do a talk. So Dan Ariely is a professor in behavioral economics, and is very well known into trying to understand how systems work, so you can offer the experience you want to offer, and also change people's behavior so they do better, things that are better for their future, like saving, or not drinking too much, or not smoking too much, or fastening your seatbelt, that sort of things. And so he did a keynote, and we also had Don Norman, who is the father of UX. He's the one who coined the term UX back in the 90s. He's a designer, and he's also a cognitive scientist. And he also accepted to do a keynote. So we had like two very big, important people doing keynote sessions, and so a lot of people were super excited, and we had nearly 300 people coming over from a lot of different parts of mostly the US, and and people were excited, and I was blown away that it created so much interest and enthusiasm, because it was put together just with a small Epic team and awesome people that helped me organize this event, and so it generated some interest. And the idea was really to talk about UX in a broad way, not just focusing on user research or focusing on UX design. And the idea was to really approach UX the way it should be, strategically and holistically, when we have a UX approach. I'm trying to not cough because
No worries. Do you want
to cough in the? No, it's fine. But that's the reason why I have a weird face right now. And so, so that was, people were enthusiastic, and it became a thing. It was not supposed to become a summit, a yearly summit, but because there was so much interest, we thought that we would keep going. And so what we did is it became a thing. So I after I left Epic, I took over. I just took the initiative for myself, so I can handle it. But the idea is like every year it's moving to another studio. So the year after that, so we started.
Okay.
We started in 20.
Okay.
Sorry, there's a little delay.
I'm just saying, so it's like a rotating summit. So one time the key organizers will be, somebody has the responsibility along with you, of course.
Yes. So I'm just here to just give the torch, pass the torch, and a different host is going to take care of the summit. So the first year it was me at Epic. Then the second year in 2017, it was Ubisoft Toronto. So it moved on to Canada. The year after that, it was EA in Vancouver. The year after that, that was last year, it was in France. And this year was supposed to be hosted by Bungie, but because of the coronavirus has been canceled. We're just going to do I'm just going to organize a little online thing. It's going to be low key early October. And next year we're going to do it at Bungie. Hopefully things are going to be better back then. But yeah, that's the idea, is to move it around, and I'm trying also to bring it to Europe every other year. So it's also to another continent. It's not always just the people having to fly over. It would be nice to have it in Asia at some point. I don't know, but we'll see. It's just
Absolutely.
it's just
So I
a
was just
small
going to
thing.
ask you.
Yeah,
I was
it'd be
just going
fun.
to ask you that, this time around, is it going to be virtual or is it something that you're planning still in person? What are you thinking?
So this year is going to be virtual only, and it's just going to be one day. So typically the Game UX Summit today is 2 days of conferences. And then you have a third day of master classes that are hosted by the host. This year is just like hard for everybody. And again, the Game UX Summit is just all volunteering work. It's not for profit at all. And so what I decided is like, all right, let's just punt it, the Bungie one, we could just do it next year. And this year, I'm just going to organize just a day of online, I'm going to just invite, it's going to be just Game UX and friends, sort of things, just invite a few people to do fireside stuff like that, or panels or mentoring for people. So it's going to be low key. I'm going to do some things not announced yet officially, but I'm putting this together.
So let us know, because I do know that, I'm just saying let us know, because there are quite a lot of young people who are in design and, in the gaming industry as well. So I think this could be interesting for them, especially considering it's virtual. So from Pakistan, you can't imagine how difficult it is, A, to get the visa, B.
I know, I've been doing a few masterclasses online in Pakistan, so I know. But the problem is the time difference. Because if we started at 9 a.m. Pacific time, it's going to be 9 p.m. for you.
We stay up till quite late. Don't worry about it. Right now, it's 8:30. Okay, so it's okay. But we can talk a little bit more about it later anyway. Now, let me jump to our next question, right, about your book. So tell me about the gamer's brain, how neuroscience and UX can impact video game design, and who is it for? Why did you write it?
Yes.
Who has read it? How is it being used now?
I don't know who's read it. I hope a lot of people. So it's made mostly for game developers. So it's for people who create games and they want to understand a little bit better how the brain works, so they can make a better game and understand how UX works. What is this mindset? What this is all about? And I describe the framework that I've been using on Fortnite. So I talk about the two main pillars in game user experience: usability, which we talked about, the ability of the system to be used by humans, and engageability. So the ability of the system, the game, to be fun and engaging. So I explain all of that, and I also explain what UX strategy is, how to put together a pipeline. So there's a lot of stuff in the book. Is basically my background in psychology and cognitive psychology. So the first part of the book is about how the brain works. So I talk about perception, attention, memory, motivation, emotion, and learning principles. This is the whole first part of the book. So this is actually can be useful for anyone, although I do take examples from video games. So for anyone who plays games, who wants to learn a bit more about the brain. And then the second part is more about how to apply these principles, and what is user experience, what is this mindset, and how we apply it to make games. So the second part is really more geared toward people who make games, so game designers, system designers, artists, animators, artistic directors, creative directors, gameplay programmers, UI programmers, UI artists, interaction designers. All I'm hoping like that UX designers already know all these stuff, but it's also for producers. It's going to be very important for them to know how these things work, so that it can be in the pipeline. And so, this is the main target for this book, and yeah.
Okay, yeah, that sounds. I mean, I'm interested in reading it now, especially the first half. The first part, right? Okay, how does the brain work? I think everybody needs to know a little bit more about themselves and other people that they're talking to anyway.
I agree. With this knowledge, you can improve pretty much anything in life. How you learn, how you study, how you, how to avoid mistakes and miscommunications, and it's useful for everyone. So that's the part that I love. Understanding, try to understand humans. It's quite
Did
fascinating.
you, maybe at Duke University, did any of the students, did you actively, tell them about the book that they may want to, okay, not should sounds very, authoritarian, but maybe
Yeah,
they
so
may want to,
yeah, so
yeah.
I left North Carolina not too long after I left Epic, and I was traveling a bunch before that anyway. So I interacted with Duke University with the NRA's lab a little bit, but it was more for master classes and stuff like that. But I did not go to Duke and say, "Hey, read my book." But I do reach out. I do reach out to universities who have a game designs course, or game development course, so that they can have a better understanding of all that. Yes.
Okay. All right. So, all of this information I'm just locking away at the back of my brain because remember what we were discussing earlier. So all of this is going to fit in some way. So tell us something else, So tell us, in your experience, what are some of the strategies that game studios can actually adopt to increase, to increase the chances that their games will be engaging and successful?
Yeah. So it's
wow.
really.
Oh, by
What's
the way, sorry, before you answer this question, so Rija is saying I've read it and taught it to my team members and was just about to say, what a book.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty awesome.
Thank
There you
you.
go. Somebody's read it who we know.
So there you go. I can say that to answer your question. Buy my book, so you can figure it out. Yeah. So it's really everything that we talked about. Understanding, because we're making products, and people who make products, even not video games, they make it for other humans to use. So we need to understand a little bit, shift from our perspective. If we make something, we already have an idea of what this is all about. So for us, it's obvious. And so it's just hard to anticipate how someone who doesn't know anything about your product, even if it's, whether it is an app or a system or an object or a video game. And so we need to shift. And so UX is that mindset of shifting from our own perspective when we do stuff, so that we can adjust and adopt the perspective of the end users. This is what you can do to ensure that your product is going to be engaging to these users, to just iterate, and to make sure you have that design thinking process. You have assumptions, and you sketch and you prototype and you test it and you look at how people like it or not, understanding or not, how they're going to use it, because you're trying to solve problems for them. And so this is how we can iterate into it like this. Now, a video game is not just a product that we interact with. It's an art form. So of course, with video games, there are some choices we're going to make to make people feel and have certain emotions. Like maybe you make a video game that's a horror game, so you want people to jump scare, or you make a game about, I don't know, the ecology and then how to improve what's going on Earth. So you want people to understand these things, and it's going to be more educational. So depending on what sort of experience you want to offer them, it's going to be different. That there's a layer regarding culture and art that is going to be even more complex than for an object or a system. And so the whole thing is really knowing where you want to go, and having a UX mindset is going to help you get there. It's not going to help you do your job. You know how to do your job as a game designer or as a programmer. It's just going to help the whole team stay on track and just ensure that what is it you're trying to accomplish is what players in the end are going to experience. So it's just a set of tools. I just don't want to get into details because it's then I'm here for hours. But it's just a set of tools that is like a checklist that is avoiding us as we get there to not fall into traps and do missteps and not not staying on track. And it's about iterating. It's about failing early so we can fix it early before it's too late to implement it or art it up. And it's all about trying to put stuff together, even if it's quick and dirty, so we can test it and immediately know if it's going to work or not before waiting until it's, the old way of making things is just like you think about it just yourself and then you implement it in a silo and then you're like, yeah, it's good, now launch it, and then you launch it. Of course it crashes because you just did it in a silo.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is to do it smaller and do step by step, and every step of the process verifying that your assumptions were true with the end user, so that you're not losing track of what's going on, because we're all biased. Our perception is subjective, so we're not the best people to understand if our product is going to work or not.
Of course, and especially when you're talking about the creative industry, we're even more at times particular about safeguarding our idea, right? It's our idea, it's our baby, it's, whatever.
Yes.
The magic is all in our hearts and minds, except the other person may not realize that you've produced a masterpiece. It was just a masterpiece for you. So completely agreed over there. But what I wanted to ask you, my next thing was, so what are the best ways? So when you're talking about how the entire team needs to be on the same page and then need to, be looking at this all the time, right? So what are some of the tools through which is there, have you seen people put up Gantt charts? Are they, how visual is it? How are they making sure that they're on track? What are some of the tools to visualize this?
Okay, so so different ways for doing it. You can have like a holistic version of your game and try to visualize that. So it can be expressed through molecules. Your game has different systems, and this is how the system is going to be working together, and you have like a big picture of what your game is all about, and so that people can stay on track. You have different ways of visualizing that. In my book, I invited Jean Guédon, who's a creative director on the Assassin's Creed, to explain his way of making sure people stay on track on the game. So he calls that the zoom in, zoom out. So it's very important to always have the big picture in mind before, as when we work on something, we have the big picture and then we zoom in and we're going to work on this full feature or this full system. And sometimes we forget to zoom out to remember, what is this for? How this system is going to take part into the big picture. So these are some elements that you can use to help you do that thing. Always keep in mind the big picture. Then the checklist that I was talking about in terms of usability and engageability, there are some very precise elements. So for example, in usability, form follows function is a good thing to keep in mind. Like if I'm trying to look at objects around me, if I can take an example, because I don't want to take the same example with so post-its and not. So here's a good example of post-its with a bad form follows function. Like post-it, there's a part that's sticky, okay? So that's the sticky part. And so if you want to write something and you want to stick it there, you have to find out where is the sticky part. And so post-its, it's a very good example where it's not telling you it's a square, and so until I really look at where is the sticky part, I don't know as a user. And so sometimes I start writing and then I have to there you go. So this is an example. It's bad usability. Whether they want to solve that problem or not is another question, but just by looking at the object, do I know how to use it? Like the example of the mug, just by looking at it, I know that I can hold it there to drink about. So we have that in games, except that it's not physical, but we have signs and feedback in games. So we see something. There's a ladder in the game, so that's telling me that I can climb in and go. So there's all these elements, this checklist, to make sure that you don't forget. That's going to help you avoid the common pitfalls. And then it's all about testing. So making sure you're going to play test your game regularly. So think about how you're going to do that and prepare your pipeline. And there's also thinking about the onboarding of the game, how you're going to onboard players. So how you're going to teach all the different elements to your game, to your players from your game, and when and how, and when is going to be too much. So I give a few elements in the book to go through that. But if before buying the book, you can also go on my website, celiahodent.com. I give away a lot of stuff, through presentations that you can already take a look, so you have a better idea of what it is. Because it's not so hard to just explain without showing. That's why I prefer to have a PowerPoint, so I can show you, okay, this is what I mean. It's just
No, agreed.
talking through
But I
it
was
is
just going to kind of quickly talk about an anecdote, right? So my daughter nowadays is playing a lot of Roblox, and she was
Mhm.
convincing me to play with her as well. So I ended up playing, all these games where you hop around and stuff like that, right? And then you keep falling, and the minute you fall, you have to start from level 0, which is really annoying, unless you've reached a checkpoint, right? So if you've reached a checkpoint, thank God you survive and you emerge at the checkpoint. Otherwise, you would have to start from 0. So anyway, but in some of the games, you never know where you have to go. So she kept laughing at me because she was like, Mama, you just came from here, you have to go there, but it doesn't give me a sign, right? So I'm just like,
Yep.
okay, now I know, right? But it's just kind of like for a second, you keep turning and going backwards, whereas
Yeah.
you're supposed to go in another direction, but it doesn't tell you where that direction is. Whereas usually there's a little arrow which starts blinking and it tells you, right?
There
Same
you
thing
go.
with Mario Brothers. Remember Mario Brothers? There were certain pots of plants that you could jump on and you could actually bend down and they would take you downstairs into the coin room.
Yeah.
But I don't know how we discovered it the first time around. Either you, at that point in time, usually you used to learn from somebody who's been there, done that, and they
Yes.
would share with you, right? Because now
Yeah.
you have YouTube, you have all of these videos to learn from other players. But at that
Yeah.
point in time, you didn't have these cheat sheets and whatnot,
But
right?
that's
So
the
I thought,
interesting part in games. It might very well be by design. And I think in the Mario example, it's by design because
yeah,
a game is also interesting when you make discoveries and by
of course,
yourself. And so
yeah.
there are elements in the game that are not going to be following the rule
Mm.
because you want to make it more engaging, and curiosity and discovery is a way to make games more engaging. So in that case, you're not going to offer a sign. Sometimes games do offer a subtle sign, like Zelda. Sometimes you're gonna see cracks in the wall, so oh, I can put a bomb in there. So the signs can be more or less obvious, and sometimes they are not there just to make discovery, people discover stuff, and that's also what makes games
Intriguing
engaging.
and interesting, of course.
Yes.
Okay, so before we go, I know that we're down to our last 14-15 minutes. So I did want to talk a little bit about what the role of educational games can be in terms of diversity, inclusion at the workplace, and also, inclusion in terms of different types of learners. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so it's actually pretty complex, but I'm not sure that we can solve everything through games. I think games can be very useful for many things, but in terms of diversity, it's another layer of problems, and we first need to understand our biases because. If you want to hire for diversity and inclusion, you have to check your own biases, because as humans, we have biases. We have, our blinds, and we are more likely to hire someone who looks like us, or is coming from the same school, or who have the same hobbies, just because this is the way we are. And so we need to check our own biases and make a process to take them into account so that you don't fall for that. Games can be helpful to make you see a different perspective than yours, but there's a limit to the power of games. So I'm not entirely sure that we can make it just to raise awareness. Yes, games can be great for that, but to really have an impact, we just gonna have to do the work through our HR processes to make it more inclusive. So I don't know if this is the sort of if that was the point of your question, if that makes sense.
Well, that
But
definitely
we
makes
can.
sense. The
Okay.
other part of the question was, how can games actually be used to target different types of learners to help making learning become easier for them, right? Because
Yes.
everybody doesn't. I mean, some people are more visual. Maybe it's much more
Yes.
um,
So
engaging, memory-wise, all of that. Yeah.
yes. So the problem with that is it's a big myth in education that people learn better through their preferred style of learning. Learning styles, there's some research on that. And so first of all, it's actually pretty complex to know which is your best learning style. But there's some research actually showing that it's not true that people learn better through the preferred learning style. And it's very much depends on what is it they're learning. And so overall, that's not always true, but overall, what works better is to learn by doing. So, and that is for everyone. But what we do with a game is that we try to multiply the channels. So and that's for better accessibility reason, just this period, just for better accessibility, you should not use only one channel to teach something. So for example, a sign like the crack in the wall I was talking about, that's only a visual sign. And so if you have a crack in the wall and when you as the character passes and walks past it, and you hear like a weird, as if there were wind blowing from the thing. So you have also a sound effect associated to it. That's going to be better for accessibility. And also you're going to have multiple channels to learn about something. So what we do with in education, we try to multiply these channels, and also we try to teach one thing in different contexts. To take an example from games, you talked about Mario. You need to teach players to jump in Mario. So the first time you're going to jump, there is a turtle passing by, and you jump above or on the turtle, and then you hit the thing. And so the whole level design is made to encourage you to do things without having to say, hey, press that button to jump. And then you're going to have to jump over an obstacle. And then you have to jump higher, and then you're going to jump and shoot. And so in very different contexts, you learn how to jump. And this is what works well in education, is not just to learn about a thing, as to repeat what you learn, but you repeat it in multiple contexts. So this is what can be useful for learning. And the other very useful thing for learning is to give immediate feedback. And this is what games can offer. This is the power of games. You don't have to wait until the professor did the correction to have that. You can immediately know if it works or not. And again, iterate. It's also like the design thinking process. You have an obstacle and you try to solve the problem. And so you try, you fail, you iterate, and then you succeed. So games are good for that. They're good to help players learn in a system with immediate feedback, and we can use a lot of different channels, but be careful with the learning styles, because there's a big myth. So I start my book with myth about the game, and this one is in there. It's a myth that we learn better through our preferred learning style. But games cannot solve for everything either. It's actually pretty difficult to make a game that's going to teach players something in the game and make sure that this, what you learn in the game is going to transfer onto other contexts, other situations like in real life. That's a real problem in anything educational. It's not just a problem from games. It's just like with chess, you have the same problem. Like people who play chess, through chess, they learn some elements.
Strategy.
But it doesn't transfer to life. So if you learn how to play chess, you're not going to get smarter. And overall in life, it's not true. And it's the same thing with games. And so that transfer is not that good. You can in some cases there's a near transfer. So if you play action games, you're going to be a bit better at processing like a lot of different moving targets at the same time. But you're not going to be better at strategy overall, actually. It's hard. So these are the benefits and the limits, the limitations of video games for education. Sorry, it was a long answer. There's so many things to say.
That's fine. While you were speaking, I was just thinking about different times when, especially for learning how to type. I remember there used to be this game with frogs on it, etc. And,
Yes.
They had these keys on it, and you had to type. And because the desktop didn't exist when I was a kid, it only came when I was a slightly older, child. So we had to learn how to type that way. And even for my daughter, I remember teaching her math. There was this coin game. I don't remember the name of the game, but there was this coin game where you had to stack it up in units and tens and hundreds. And, it would give you a short prize the minute you would win, right? Of course. And that's what you're saying about instant feedback. And I think that's, again, something which can be
and it's good also for conditioning. So if you have like when you learn your multiplication tables, this is conditioning. You just like rote learning, you just repeat it. Just by repeating it in different contexts, that's going to help. Typing is actually what we call implicit memory, because it's muscle memory. So it's a whole different thing. So if the gesture is going to be exactly the same in the game than if you type a letter, then yes, it's going to help you do that, because this is near transfer, because it's exactly the same gesture that you do just in a different context. That's it. So it's good for that. But it's just, if you learn to do something, sometimes like people say, oh yeah, it's just, we're going to have that game and people are going to go outdoors and do exercise. It's going to be awesome. And then they're going to learn how to exercise. But as soon as you stop playing the game, most people they just don't go out there and they just don't do that exercise anymore. So it's not transferring. At sound of the game is here, it's gone.
No, and of course, I mean, it's very easy nowadays, especially because of COVID. Anyway, my daughter is like 10 years old, but she's like a homebody, okay? She doesn't like to step out of the house at all. And COVID has just given her that opportunity. So now she's like, oh yeah, but Mama, look, I don't know, what did you say to me the other day? I told her, let's go for an excursion. So she had a school assignment about an excursion. And I said, look, we need to go places so you can actually write about that, right? And she says, oh, that's why, she said something. So I said, no, and we must go to mountains and we must start hiking again. Don't you want to go to Mount Everest? And she says, Mama, that's what Google pictures are for. That's what Google is. You can just see it in pictures. I don't want to go. It's like, oh my God. Okay, all righty. So yeah, so absolutely. So look, final couple of questions. Yes. One was about the role that these games can play in curbing some of the negative elements of the game industry, like ethics and dark patterns. And, you talked about that in your profile as well. So that's something that we wanted to talk about. And then the final note was just your advice to people who are actually trying to enter into this industry and trying to pursue a career in UX.
Yes. So UX is here to stay, and it's very, especially today, there's so much competition, and people are not having a UX mindset are less likely to succeed. So I think UX is going to even become bigger, and especially in video games. But with UX comes great responsibility, because the idea of UX is to always put players in terms of games, players first. So you put users first. So the idea is you're going to make money because your product is going to be the best possible for users. It's going to reply, is going to fit their needs, and they're going to have a good experience using it. And so they're going to buy it and they're going to keep using it. That's the idea. It's a win-win situation. But now there's another way of making money. It's by using dark patterns. Dark patterns is a design that is intentionally deceiving for users, and the intent is to trick them into buying or staying more on the platform at their expense. It is using the same principles from psychology. It's, for example, we know that we don't have good attentional resources. So when you do UX, you ensure that the call to action is big, like a big button saying buy here. That's not to convince people to buy, but it's just to make sure that people who want to buy don't spend too much time figuring out how to buy it. And so we make it easier because we know that attention resources are scarce and we don't have the time. But now you can use that knowledge not for the benefit of users, but to make it more prevalent, an option that you prefer them to do. Just like Amazon does that, like they have a big orange button to say get started once you put stuff in your cart. But if you don't pay attention to what you get started to, is actually getting you started to Amazon Prime. And so you're subscribing by clicking on the big orange button. You actually subscribe to Amazon Prime, where you maybe just wanted to check out. If you want to check out without subscribing, you actually need to click on the small link on the left that it's super small. And so this is a dark pattern because it's using this knowledge of how the brain works and the flaws that we have to trick people into doing something that they might not want it to do. And so these practices are not new. Even before technology was there, but it's with technology, it's making it more systemic and systematic also. And so it's started to be used in games, and we need to make sure that we don't do that, because having a UX mindset is about putting users first. It's a win-win situation. It is, if you start using dark patterns, this is actually anti-UX, actually like betraying this UX mindset. So if you want to get into be a UX professional, we have to step up and be a bit more vocal about these techniques so that we don't exploit our customers, and we just make better experiences. And this is how we're gonna have a better product. And it's a trust relationship where we enter into a trust relationship with users, with customers. It's not about tricking them and hopefully users are gonna, like, people are gonna be
appreciate that. Absolutely.
Yeah. If people know better about these things, then they're gonna recognize when these tricks are used against them and gonna reject this company. Hopefully, then I hope this is what's gonna happen.
No, I completely agreed. I think this is the long-term approach. This is it may be the more patient approach. It's not the shortcuts approach, but usually, not sometimes, but usually that's the long approach works better, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of us know the story about the hare and the tortoise, and guess who won the race, right?
There you go. Patience.
And I think one of the things which is becoming trickier in this world with digital technology and everything available at the click of your finger is the patience. We're losing it, right? We're not being patient at all.
Humans were never really patient, but before they did not have any other choice. Today we have the choice to not be patient, so we're just favoring that choice. It's just the thing.
So look, thank you so much, Celia, for making time. I think this was excellent. I think our audience learned a lot. There's still some sticky followers who are watching, and looking forward to speaking to you a little bit more separately as well, and working together with you.
Yeah, with pleasure. Yeah, we can try to organize something in Pakistan, so you have, with the time zones, it'll be easier. And sometimes I'm in France, so it's actually easier in terms of time zones.
Yes, just 3 hours apart. So where do you, when you're in France, where do you base yourself?
Oh, in Paris area. All my family is over there. So I'm actually going back on Monday. So.
Oh, excellent. All right. So say hello to Eiffel Tower for me.
Okay, I'll try. I don't know if I'll go near the Eiffel Tower, but if I do.
It's a very touristic thing to do.
Sounds good.
All right. So have a great day, and thank you once again.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. Take care. Stay safe.
Yes, thank you. Likewise. All right, so this was Celia Hodent, and just very quickly letting you know that on Saturday I'll be back for Impacting Lives this time around with a very good friend of mine called Kushal Gunasekera, who is Sri Lankan, and he's the founder of Foundation for Goodness. So do watch in and do listen in if you have time. If not, you can always watch it on YouTube. So thank you very, very much. It'll be the same time, 8 o'clock Pakistan time, 8:30 Sri Lanka time, GMT +5. Whatever, all of that and above. So thank you so much for watching and looking forward to Saturday. Bye-bye.